Hi, friends. Come on in, grab your coffee and Bible, and let's sit together as we start the book of First Corinthians for the month of May. After walking through the Gospel of John and seeing Jesus clearly as the Son of God, we now move into one of Paul's most practical letters to the early church. I'm so excited to begin this with you. This is Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth. He wrote it around AD 53 while he was on his third missionary journey, staying in Ephesus for about 3 years. The church in Corinth was young, passionate, and full of problems. Corinth was a busy, wealthy port city known for its trade, its immorality, and its many pagan temples. The believers there came from very different backgrounds. Some were Jews, most were Gentiles, some were very rich, most were very poor, some were slaves, and some were free. They brought all kinds of old habits and ideas into the church, and that created a lot of confusion and conflict. Paul wrote 1 Corinthians to correct, teach, and encourage this messy but beloved church family. He does not beat around the bush. He calls sin sin, and he offers straightforward solutions. In this letter, he identifies problems that had risen in the Corinthian church and offers solutions while discipling the believers by teaching them how to live for Christ in a fallen and corrupt society. A little background about Paul. He had a dual identity. He was born a Jew, but he held Roman citizenship. He was born in Tarsus, and his parents were Jewish, descended from the tribe of Benjamin. He was a Pharisee with Roman citizenship rights. He was educated under Gamaliel and trained in Jewish law, the best of the best. This dual status put him in the ideal position to understand and communicate with both Jews and Gentiles. His intentions and efforts were sincere, even though he started out violently persecuting the church. He was present at Stephen's stoning. And that sounds a little crazy saying that about someone who persecuted the church, right? That he was sincere? Yes. But he made up for it for the rest of his life by applying that same drive and passion to evangelize many nations and plant many churches. On his way to Damascus, where he was planning on persecuting the church, Jesus appeared to him personally, and his life was radically changed forever. Before his conversion, only a few Gentiles heard the gospel. Barnabas fetched Paul in Tarsus and took him to Antioch. There they evangelized together on Paul's first missionary trip. Paul worked hard at convincing the Jews that the Gentiles were now accepted by God, and he worked even harder to try and convince the Gentiles that God had accepted them. He preached the gospel throughout the Roman Empire, and he wrote letters to various churches that now make up the majority of the New Testament for us. He was not afraid of facing issues and dealt with them head on in true Pauline style. 3 main lessons that we learn from Paul's life are: the good news is that forgiveness is available to everyone as a gift of God's grace through faith in Jesus. Obedience cannot create a relationship with God, but it is the result of walking in a relationship with God. God does not waste our time and will use every part, good or bad, from our life for his glory. So, what did the Corinthian church do that was so bad that Paul felt the need to say, hey, we gotta talk, this is serious? They were divided due to arrogance among powerful members. They struggled to work together when it came to advancing the gospel. They needed to build up the faith of those who were weak and work at witnessing effectively to unbelievers that had a lot to learn. Other issues were immorality, idolatry, and poor theological understanding. Paul wrote to them to resolve these issues so that they may be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous and strong, and do everything in love. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13 through 14. Paul invites the Corinthian church to a higher standard where they will be unified, reject sin, and love and serve one another. Main themes covered in this letter from Paul are the church as dwelling place for the Spirit, building up the church in practical ways such as being sensitive to those new in the faith, sharing the gospel with unbelievers, conducting worship services in an orderly manner so as not to scare away unbelievers, and using spiritual gifts to build up the church, not to gain positions. Sexual activity should be limited to marriage. Trust in the gospel and living the way that God commands is more important than religious acts. The bodily resurrection of Christ and believers is a core doctrine of the Christian faith. Both Corinth and Ephesus were wealthy port cities, but they had deep pagan and idolatry roots. So Paul faced some typical Greek cultural challenges such as sexual immorality, idolatry, divisive philosophies, and rejection of belief in Christ's bodily resurrection. Corinth was famous for its sensuality and prostitution. Prostitution was an actual professional career in their temples dedicated to Aphrodite, Venus, the goddess of lustful love. Over 1,000 prostitutes served in the Aphrodite temple. Paul also confronts the Corinthians on some of the frenzied acts of paganism that showed up when it came to the exercising of spiritual gifts. Hence his reason for telling them to cool it in worship services and do it in an orderly manner. Paul references Jesus 10 times in just the first 10 verses. He does this to establish the fact that Jesus Christ is the foundation of the church and the only basis for unity and fellowship in the body. Christ should be the example that we follow in all our behavior. As we go through 1 Corinthians day by day, we are going to see Paul deal with real problems in a real church with real grace and truth. Some parts will challenge us, some will comfort us. All of it is meant to help us grow in the kind of people and the kind of church that honors Christ. I'm really looking forward to walking through this book, through this letter with you. We are going to learn a lot about what it means to be the church in a broken world, something we truly need right now. Thank you for joining me in this introduction to 1 Corinthians. If it stirred your heart or got you excited to see what God has for us in His book, would you please share this video with a friend? God willing, I will see you in the next video as we begin with chapter 1. And until then, remember, we are called to live holy, loving, and united lives because we belong to Jesus and you are deeply, deeply loved. Shalom, shalom.